how do we get documents from a foreign country notarized in a way that can be accepted here?
Yeah, so there's a process or a procedure. That country, they have to be a member of the Hague Convention, but
Taking you back to social studies. So we are going to talk today about some things that you can face when you are dealing with a foreign seller. We're going to assume for this purpose that this person does not have a U.S. taxpayer ID number and they're domiciled in a country other than the United States. It comes as no surprise to people buying and selling property in North Carolina that the documents would need to be in English. So what about the notary? Can you talk a little bit about how do we get documents from a foreign country notarized in a way that can be accepted here?
yeah, so there's a process or a procedure. We call it an apostille. Both countries would recognize the certificate or the notarial certificate of the neighboring country. But there are some specifics here. There has to be, a certificate in the native language, and then there has to be a translation at the bottom of the document as well into English so that it can be verified for both parties, both countries.
And one thing that I'm thinking of, a situation you had a couple months ago, a smart thing that you did was say, all right, this is what it's going to look like. Let's go to the County Register of Deeds and ask them, is this going to be accepted for recording? And you did that before the other party ever executed anything. And that's because the County Register of Deeds is the ultimate authority on what they will accept and not. So if they said, the margins aren't good, or no, we can't take that, we need this whatever other requirement, then you were able to get ahead of that for the sellers that were in the other country.
And there's a risk there. Your seller may go and have everything notarized, and then the Register of Deeds rejects it. Mm-hmm. So then we are back to square one. Mm-hmm. So in that particular instance, I was able to successfully convince the seller that they needed to go to a local embassy and have the documents executed. That was a safe way to make sure that the documents were notarized, that it would have the right margins.
And probably our preferred method, if we can do it, is a notary appointment at the embassy. But you can run into challenges there. Appointments are not easy to come by. And I think your sellers had to wait quite a while, or it took them a while to get that appointment, like 6 weeks or something. So it's a planning ahead moment of, if you're going to try to get an appointment at the embassy, try to do it ahead of time. Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk about I would say maybe the most complicated part of dealing with foreign sellers, and it's taxes to good old Uncle Sam. And whose responsibility is it to pay the taxes? So if you think about it, in a normal real estate transaction, at the residential closing, the buyer's attorney will submit a 1099 to the IRS or a certification for no reporting to the IRS, just notifying the IRS, hey, the seller has sold property. They get a 1099. What was the gross, or basically what was the sale price? And then when it's time to file taxes, the seller will handle all of that whenever they file their taxes. Well, what if the seller is not a U.S. taxpayer? They're not just lucky and don't have to pay taxes. The burden to pay the taxes, or remit the taxes, shouldn't say pay the taxes, is shifted to the U.S. taxpayer, which is the buyer. So the buyer becomes essentially the withholding agent, and the buyer has to fill out some special forms and has to withhold money from the seller's proceeds and send it to the IRS. And sellers may not always like that, because they're thinking, I don't owe any money to the U.S. government. Well, the U.S. government disagrees, and the buyer has a legal obligation to send that money on. Let's say it's a buyer, there's no exemptions. The buyer has to withhold 15% of the sale price and fill out some special forms. And then, like, for example, if we're the closing attorney, we will aid them in remitting the money straight out of the proceeds to the IRS. It has to be done within 20 days of closing. And if the seller doesn't like that, then they need to apply for a taxpayer ID and file the appropriate paperwork with the IRS so that they can get, whatever they think they're owed back, if the U.S. agrees with that. You have a $100,000 property, you owe $70,000 on it, you got to pay commissions, you got to pay your share of the taxes, and then 15%. There could be scenarios where the seller either does not make any money off the sale or has to bring money to meet those obligations. If there's judgments or liens, or the commissions take it over whatever they would have gotten back. then the seller might have to bring money just to be able to sell the property. And sellers don't like that.
No.
No.
And I'm no tax attorney, so I don't pretend to be.
Me either.
But-
I don't want to be.
But what I do know, through our limited research with real estate is the US, they have a very wide reach, if you will. Some countries do not tax sellers on real estate like the United States does, but we have a very broad reach as far as taxes are concerned. And that, goes to your point of why so much has to be held back. Yeah, we like that tax money. So
Yeah. So thank you, Erica,
Thank
for
you.
joining me again. I can't wait to have you back on again soon. In the meantime, I guess that's it for our show today. Thanks for joining us on the North Carolina Real Estate Show. We'll catch you on the next one.